Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, and welcome to the second ever episode of The High Roller Hunt. This is my series where I try out IEMs with 4 or 5 digit price tags to try and weed out what the first things I would buy if I won the lottery would be. This is going to be a 3-part series. I've got 3 high dollar IEMs to look at before CanJam. Last time we had an IEM from a boutique manufacturer, but today's specimen comes from one of the biggest names in Chi-Fi. This absolute beauty is the Moondrop Psyche. It is Moondrop's multi-driver flagship IEM priced at $2,400, featuring hand-inlaid precious metals and a faceplate that pays tribute to Mitsuki Yuki, Moondrop's mascot. Does the sound match the looks? Well, let's find out. As usual, quick disclaimer, this unit is on loan from Compadres Club member Z. Because I didn't pay for these, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. As always, I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Huge thank you to Z for loaning me this set. Means this video is technically the first Compadres Club sponsored video, so huge shout out to all the other members of the Compadres Club, and thank you to all of you who aren't members for watching. It's thanks to all of you that I get to try cool stuff like this. So as far as the unboxing experience goes, despite the sky-high price tag here, the unboxing experience is really similar to the Blessing 3 or the Dusk, actually. It's that same gift box style where you open it up and see the IEMs and the accessories. The IEMs will be on their foam tray. The cable is inside this classic, leather Moondrop style case. You also get a full set of Soft Ears fancy ultra clear tips in this box. You also get a set of Moondrop sort of more standard bore black silicone tips also in this box. You also get a wonderful little postcard with the box art on it. She looks absolutely gorgeous there. And you get a version of Moondrop's Echo B DSP DAC dongle that matches the cable itself. The case itself here is very crush resistant even when it's not zipped up all the way. The inside is super soft so as not to damage those very delicate shells. You get a mesh pocket here to keep the other stuff in. It's just your standard sort of Moondrop case, same one you see on the Dusk or the Blessing 3. I will say, for $2,000 plus, getting the overall same level of accessories you get on a $400 or $300 something set is a little disappointing, but I'm thinking all of the cost has gone into the precious metals in those faceplates as well as the drivers, so I can kind of forgive Moondrop for this one. It is just a tad bit disappointing, though. Let's have a chat about the cable. Honestly, for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think Moondrop can make some of the best looking IEM cables on the market, but I also think they have some absolute stinkers in their lineup. This cable looks and feels extremely premium. It's got that nice two-tone color to it. It's got a nice heft to it. It feels wonderful in the hands, honestly. My biggest problem with it is it's extremely memory prone. It doesn't wrap well, it forms loops and things, and it still has kinks in it from when it was in the packaging when I received this. It's just not fantastic. The amp connector here is 4.4 millimeter only and has some nice Psyche branding on it, which is quite good. It's clean and sleek, maybe a little bit slippery on heavier amps or players, but that's sort of normal here. The Y-split has the same sort of weird number code that Moondrop tends to put on these, no other branding, and the chin slider is a standard sort of ring unit that works well with the plastic coating on those wires and stays put where you put it. The 2-pin connectors are also a disappointment. While the ear hooks are nice and soft and comfortable, the 2-pin connectors are this rather cheap-looking plastic, and the stereo indicators are next to impossible to make out on them. You can see them right there. But unless you're looking at them at a certain angle, they're very, very difficult to see. I guess it matches the see-through shells on the Psyche. Maybe that's what they were going for, but I really wish they would have matched the rest of the hardware on the cable rather than the shells on the IEM. I do like the fact that the included Echo B adapter matches the aesthetic of the cable. It's just a nice little touch. But yeah, for a $2,000 IEM, I feel like this cable is just a little disappointing. The look and feel, as I said, is fine, except for those low-rent 2-pin connectors, but the way the cable behaves in everyday use just probably means you'll be wanting a second-hand replacement for these at some point. Stay. Okay. The Psyche here is Moondrop's flagship IEM tribute to their mascot Mitsuki Yuki, and as such, they have pulled out absolutely all the stops for the faceplates on this set. The rest of the IEM, however, is very similar in construction to the Dusk or the Blessing 3. These are full 3D printed resin shells, and interestingly, they aren't completely filled, as you can see from the resin line there on the sort of nozzle of the IEM where the tubes are. The nozzles, by the way, are naked resin with open sound filters. You can see a 680 ohm nulls damper in there. That will kind of protect from moisture and debris, but if the Variations is any indication, you might want to consider tips with a wax guard or maybe stick an aftermarket filter over these. In terms of ventilation, there is a small hole here next to the wrapping on the microplanar drivers. It does work. I got no pressure buildup issues and no driver flex from these horizontally mounted dynamic drivers, which is always nice to see on a nice and expensive IEM. For $2,000, I think it is a bit of a bummer that these shells aren't filled, but maybe that would have caused ventilation issues, so maybe that's why they didn't do it. Overall, I would say the build is fine, but it also doesn't feel super special or anything for something that's over $2,000. Let's go ahead and pull up the specs. For their flagship, Moondrop have gone with a tribrid configuration and have elected a pair of dynamic drivers in Moondrop's horizontally opposed HODUS configuration. Moondrop does not list any diaphragm material or any other information on these dynamic drivers on their site, other than the fact that they're 10 millimeters, so I don't know too much about those dynamic drivers. Same, honestly, goes for the balanced armatures. I just know there are 4 of them, with no real information available to me as to what type they are. The tribrid setup is completed not by a set of ESTs, but rather a quartet of microplanars. It's an interesting choice, but I don't think it really matters all that much, as we'll see later. As far as drivability goes, the Psyche had no trouble running out of my older and weaker sources, and it also changed sound very subtly with higher output impedance. However, if you have concerns, they do include a USB C dongle adapter, so there's really no need to go buy one for this particular set, and if you're spending this kind of money, you probably have one that's going to work well anyway. The nozzles here are a little bit wider than average at 6¼ millimeters, their widest point, and despite using precious metals in the faceplate, the shell weight is around 10 grams a side, which is a little weighty for a resin IEM, but it's nothing compared to some of the all-metal chunksters that I've had on the scales. Overall, I would say nothing too crazy in terms of specs here. And now for what will probably be a very controversial segment of the cool wall. The faceplate design here is one of the truly luxurious aspects of the Psyche. This is a precious metal relief of Mitsuki Yuki with different designs on each faceplate, which y'all know I love it when you can distinguish left and right just by looking. These are silver panels inlaid with rose and yellow gold by hand for each faceplate. There are multiple layers of engraving and polishing happening to build up to this incredible looking faceplate here. They are true works of art, and even if you're not a fan of Mitsuki Yuki, I think it's very easy to appreciate the level of craftsmanship on display here with these faceplates. I'm going to be putting these in cool, not just because they're works of art, but because, if I'm honest, I am a fan of the whole waifu anime aesthetic that permeates some of the hobby. I think these are awesome. They probably would have made Sub-Zero if they had picked one of my preferred waifus, but you know, that's a topic for another day. While I think these are incredible, let's go ahead and see what the Council of Ladies will think of these very anime faceplates. Well, I'll tell you one thing, these are pretty, at least according to 3 of the ladies. Only lady number 4 here saying that they aren't pretty, with lady number 2 giving these a meh. As far as comments and compliments go, we see the exact same 3-2 split, so the convictions are holding. As we check out their thoughts, you can see that, honestly, the ladies who are really into anime really liked these. They love the metal and the artistry and the craftsmanship. Ladies 2 and 4, however, not so much love. Lady number 2, who voted meh, thinks that these would be great for other people, just not her, which I think is very fair, and I think that that's the main issue with the faceplates on the Psyche. If you're into the whole waifu aesthetic and you like the look of Mitsuki Yuki, you're going to love them. If not, then you're definitely going to have some issues with this design. While the shells here on the Psyche aren't enormous, they are a little bit on the larger side, and they adopt a semi-custom shape. There's a very prominent sort of comfort wing here, as well as a little valley, and a bulge here to help it sit in your ear more securely. Personally speaking, I was able to wear these for hours at a time with 0 issues in terms of comfort, no sore spots, no sharp edges, no discomfort, no issues at all. My wife, on the other hand, tried these out, and she had to give them a score of laughably bad, and she was actually really heartbroken about that because she adores the design of this IEM, and she was really sad she wasn't going to be able to wear them, at least for a little bit. She said that the combination of the nozzle size and the shell and shape of the overall size just made it so that she couldn't maintain a seal at all. So what I'll say is, if you've got smaller ears, try to find a set of these to try out before you make the investment to buy these. I will also say, unlike other IEMs that I have featured on the High Roller Hunt, these are not available as a custom design, so you can't get these as a custom fitted pair even if you wanted to. Now it's time to see how the Psyche sound. Seeing as these are a love letter to Moondrop's anime mascot, and a bit of a spoiler, I think that these sound incredible with female vocals and anime music in general, I've decided to bring back my Oops All Anime Songs music selection for this review. If you're not into that sort of thing, if you don't like that kind of music, go ahead and skip down to the Impedance Effects. The timestamps are in the description, and you should be able to pick it along the bar here. If, however, you're into anime tracks, let's see what I picked for this video. We'll kick things off with the bass, and we find that the Psyche is light but articulate and accurate with really nice texture and an ever so slight bass boost. The electronic bass line in Rina's Awake from the Deep has a satisfying thumpiness and depth to the sort of longer droning notes, but this isn't really what I would call a super bass boosted set. This is more about cleanliness, accuracy, really nice texture, and just a really good feeling to the drops when they do hit. I've said this about other sets, and I think this set will fall into that category. This set essentially does what the track asks of it. If it wants big, boomy bass, you'll get something big and boomy. If it wants something clean and tight, you'll get clean and tight. You'll get no more and no less than that. As far as bass guitar and kick drums go, one of my favorite test tracks is the ska-inspired Marshmallow Justice with Eddie Kitamura. The actually quite energetic and busy bass line here can get lost behind her vocals and the horns when they start going crazy. But with the Psyche, the bass line and the bass drum living back there never really felt lost or drowned out. The texture on the strings was nice, the drum had good presence. It's an absolute classic track, and I thought it sounded great on the Psyche. As I said, the bass is ever so slightly boosted, but it seems to do exactly what the music you're listening to asks of it, and I think it does it with wonderful texture, great articulation, and great accuracy. All I'm going to say here is horizontally opposed DDs, strike again. While the bass can be energetic, the fact that it's mostly controlled means that in terms of tonality, it doesn't really warm over or cross into the mids, making things thick or horrible sounding. The lower mids here, I feel, have just the right amount of energy to make things have enough weight and warmth to them so that they don't come across as super thin, papery, or light. Bradio's Flyers, for example, very complex track. You've got horns, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, just all going on at the same time. It all sounds very clean, very articulate. The vocals have a richness to them. The bass and the guitar, especially going into the chorus with those warmer sections, you can feel the song just warm up nicely. The horns bring a shine to everything. Everything's well separated. There's no masking. It's just a really, really great replay here. Maybe it's to be expected, as I hinted earlier, but female vocals are a real party piece here on the Psyche. The fundamentals are pushed forward a bit, the tonality isn't husked or warmed over by the bass, and it also isn't nasally or thin sounding because of the upper mids. It's just very clean, but also forward and slightly spotlit in a really nice way. Reawaker from Lisa sounds exactly as I expect it to. The bridge where she's singing in that lower register sounds really clear and articulate. You can get a bit of husk there with some warmer sets. None of that going on here. The choruses, which, let's face it, are just classic Lisa vocals, don't let her distinct vocal style down at all. She sounds really great. All of her, sort of pitch changes and things going on sound fantastic. I feel like the Psyche helps her shine just that little bit extra compared to like a more normal vocal forward set. The mids overall are very clean and extremely well realized. While the set is slightly V-shaped in nature, I don't feel that the mids are really recessed at all with how mild that V-shaped is. So honestly, well done with the mids here, Moondrop. The upper mids and treble here are suitably boosted for a set with a waifu on the faceplates. The upper mids are quite energetic and might be a touch shouty if you're sensitive to that sort of tonality. Personally, I'm not super sensitive to shout, and in songs like I with Marine and Kobo, I really don't mind that extra sparkle on the harmonics at all. The produced backing vocals, as well as the times when the two are singing and harmonizing with each other, that throws off a lot of harmonics, and this set here has them sounding nice and energetic, nice and sparkly, without straying into that painful, annoying sibilance here. The tambourine in this track is also something I like to use for testing. It can be very sharp at times, and it can get fatiguing with some sets with sort of overblown or overdone treble. The Psyche is super sparkly here, and while it does have a lot of sparkly energy, it doesn't get really over-energetic, at least to me. The percussion in Fana's Aozora no Rhapsody has a lot of little details that I like to listen for. There are bottles and triangles in the opening that can be easy to miss if you're busy jamming with the strings and the bass. They're scattered all throughout the track in little moments, adding little bits of whimsy and silliness to give the track a sort of lighthearted tone. Like with the tambourine earlier, in brighter tuned sets that can be overly sharp or piercing, or in darker sets that can be completely drowned out. I feel like the Psyche strikes the balance here very well. It is a bit on the energetic side, but not to the point where I would call it, super spicy treble. I feel like technical performance is also a strong suit of the Psyche, but it's not really what I think the point of this set is. As a pianist myself, I listen a lot to the way that the deeper piano notes in Weaver's Kuchizuke Diamond are resolved, not just when they're on their own, but also how they come across when the rest of the track is sort of fighting the piano for attention. The dual opposed DDs, as well as the balanced armatures here, I think do a great job of having the keys sound natural and cohesive. You can almost hear the finger pushing down on the keys in some of the notes. It's very real. I think the piano sounds lovely. There is a bit of extra emphasis on some of the higher octaves. I think that helps things pop a little more. You could call it unnatural. I call it exciting. Speaking of those higher octaves, I love Akira Jimbo's Set Them Free. It has that wonderful, actually played on school supplies sound to it. And listening to that on more technical IEMs has this really nice visceral quality to it. And the Psyche does give me a lot of that stuff that I listen to. The bento box and the pencil case specifically have this great sharp tonality that you can only really get by playing using those exact objects. Having all the objects on the table, when you hit one, it sort of vibrates and causes echoing and artifacting in the others that makes them ring harmonically. It's all of that's recreated very beautifully here on the Psyche. I think the technical performance of the Psyche is great. I do think it exceeds Moondrop's own variations, despite not having any ESTs, and of all the Moondrop sets I've heard, it is the most technically proficient, at least to my ears. The stereo separation and perceived 3D soundstage is another area where I feel the Psyche sort of distinguishes itself. It just does these things quite well. Nano's Savior of Song sounds appreciably stereo here. You've got the different guitars in each ear. They travel back and forth sometimes. The vocals go from sort of center image to the sides at different points throughout the track. It's fun to listen to in a very stereo set. I feel it presents very well on the Psyche, and the whole track just has great width to it on this set. As far as the perceived 3D soundstage goes, I think the Psyche is capable of uplifting some tracks that have maybe flatter or less spatial mastering, but it can't work miracles. Ali Project's Kinjirareta Asobi, for example, is mastered pretty flat, but I feel like here on the Psyche, there is some depth to the percussion, and the stereo effects of the piano, the strings, and the synths just seem to layer front to back a little bit better than they can on some flatter or less soundstagey sets. This isn't the only set that I've listened to that can do this on this track, but what it does mean is that the Psyche is firmly above average when it comes to perceived 3D soundstage and stereo separation, and only stuff with like open air drivers or bone conduction can really top this, as well as some of the other sets that are this good, at least with my ears, my brain, and my testing tracks. Now, before we jump into the comparisons, I thought we would have a quick talk about the effects of impedance adapters or using a higher output impedance source on the Psyche here. Go ahead and pull up the graph, and we can see that the Psyche adopts a slightly more V-shaped tonality here. Everything below 300 Hz gets boosted slightly from there. There is a cut between sort of 300 and 3000 Hz, and then you have a boost in the sort of air frequency where it might dip down a little bit, but honestly, I don't trust my measurement rig that far out anyway. Overall, I would say the effect is subtle but noticeable. If you've got the Psyche and you think it's lacking in vocals or is a little bit too bright with some of your sources, maybe check them out and see what the output impedance is like. Again, as I said earlier, if you've got a Psyche, you probably have a source that's got super low output impedance anyway, and you also have the option of using the Echo B, so not really a thing. The Moondrop Psyche, then, it comes off to me as a bright-leaning, mild V-shaped IEM with clean, mildly boosted bass and an emphasis on female vocals. I personally feel that this is a bit of a departure from most of Moondrop's lineup. Even though Moondrop says this is tuned to their VSTF curve, I find that it doesn't really match up too well against the other Moondrop IEMs that I've listened to. While parts of it can match parts of the frequency response of things like the Cadenza, the Land, the Blessing 3, the Psyche honestly is a pretty different IEM to essentially everything else Moondrop offers. What I've done, however, is assembled the three that I think are most relevant for this comparison, as well as another high dollar set for a good comparison segment, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So, the Moondrop IEM that I feel actually matches the Psyche the most closely is now discontinued. It is the much maligned Stellaris with those gorgeous shells. My wife actually reviewed this one, and personally speaking, I have always had a soft spot for the Stellaris in my heart for the things that it can do with orchestral or sort of operatic tracks. There's no getting around the fact that it can be extremely sharp and diabolically punishing in the treble, especially at higher volumes. To me, the Psyche sounds shockingly similar, at least in terms of tonal balance, to the Stellaris, ignoring the sort of cuttingly sharp upper mids and treble. I don't know the whole story here, but it wouldn't surprise me if the engineer who tuned the Stellaris asked for another chance to make this tuning shine, and we ended up with the Psyche. The Psyche is cleaner, wider, more resolving, and honestly just plain better executed than the Stellaris. It's 20 times more expensive. You might be able to EQ the Stellaris into the Psyche. If you have the Stellaris gathering dust, I would say give it a try. But honestly, it was very interesting to me that this is the Moondrop set that this matched the closest. Yeah, I like the Stellaris. Like I said, if you've got one, try to EQ it to this. It's going to be very difficult with the way the treble in this is tuned, but yeah, give it a shot, see what happens. Speaking of using DSP to EQ your IEM into the Psyche, Moondrop actually offers the Psyche as one of their tuning options in their app, meaning if you have any of the TWSs or the May or anything with this DSP cable, like the $400 Dusk here, you can sample out the tuning on the Psyche. The Dusk is sort of a mini version of the Psyche, at least in terms of driver configuration. It has the same horizontally opposed dynamic drivers, but it's packing 2 less balanced armatures and 2 less microplanars. The 3.5mm version of the Dusk is more neutral and more mid-centric to my ears compared to the Psyche. It's less shouty, less detailed, but also warmer and richer with, some music. It doesn't have the same delicate, shiny magic that the Psyche can have with some female vocals, nor does it have the same sort of sound staginess that the Psyche can bring. Then again, the Psyche is 6 times more expensive, and if you're using the DSP cable, at least you do have the option to tune the Dusk into sort of a Psyche facsimile, if you will. But yeah, this is not as close to the sound in this as I originally would have thought. Honestly, though, when I personally think of borderline shouty, energetic, female-focused set from Moondrop, and I think most other people would think of the Variations, their $600 EST hybrid IEM. Of all the sort of Harman-ish IEMs that I've tried, the Variations is the one that I think I have the most fondness for. The Variations does rumble a little bit more at the extreme low end of the bass than the Psyche, but honestly, that's about the only thing I prefer in terms of bass. The Psyche, I feel, just does the bass a little bit better. It might be leaner in terms of quantity, but in terms of texture, quality, and sort of dynamism, I prefer the Psyche to the Variations. I also found that the mid-range here wasn't as comparatively lean as on the Variations. I feel like both sets do have some shout potential in the upper mids, and if anything, the Psyche is actually more energetic by adding a little bit of harmonic energy over the top to make the vocals pop even more. As much as I love the Variations for a K-pop and J-pop centric sort of female-focused set, the Psyche just does that better. Again, it is 4 times the money, but it does do it better. But enough picking on its little sisters. How about we make the Psyche actually fight something in its own weight class? Well, here comes the subject of my next video, the Letshuoer Cadenza 12, priced at $2,000 US. This really is a tale of sort of 2 different brands' variations on what they call a reference tuning. The Cadenza 12 here aligns more closely to what my ears and brain personally interpret as neutral, but these 2 are just very different in terms of overall sound. The Cadenza 12 makes the Psyche come across as straight-up V-shaped with recessed mids and sparkly airy highs compared to the Cadenza 12. I do feel like the Cadenza 12 is packing more detail and does sound to me like the more technical set. They're about equal, in my opinion, in terms of sound staginess. If you're looking for an endgame set that is a true all-rounder, has a safe tuning, and works magnificently with all genres, then stay tuned for my review of the Cadenza 12. I think it might actually work for you. If, however, your library is jam-packed with female vocals, stick with the Psyche. It is magical for that sort of thing. So, wrapping everybody up on the table here, the Stellaris feels like the experimental prototype for the Psyche, where something clearly went wrong in the treble, maybe too much chemical X, who knows. Still great for a very specific person, those people who are the sort of monocle wearing, low volume classical music opera listeners. It has been discontinued, so you might have to look elsewhere if that is you. As far as the Dusk goes, with the analog cable, it's more neutral, more mid-centric, more of an all-rounder, and therefore, more affordable. I think this is more of the mainstream choice here. Just remember that with the Moondrop app and the DSP cable, you can EQ this to the Psyche using the official Moondrop app, so maybe give that a try. Variations here, I think, used to be the Moondrop female vocals king, and it still will be if you're the type of person who never sees yourself spending more than $1,000 on a set of IEMs. They're well-rounded, still fantastic for female vocals, and I think that a used pair of Variations is probably one of the better deals in audio right now. Next up, we have the Cadenza 12. This is just more neutral. It's tilted a bit down compared to the Psyche. It's more technical, more analytical, less magical with female vocals. It is a better all-rounder, but it's also lacking in any sort of excitement factor, especially in female vocals, that the Psyche might have. Psyche, honestly, is a pretty special set. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the rating scale before I get ahead of myself talking about this set specifically. Okay, so real quick, let's bring up my Money No Object ranking list and refresh ourselves as to how it works since it has been a while. List basically describes how quickly I would buy that specific IEM if I won around that amount of money in the lottery. It allows me to rank these expensive IEMs without having to consider things like price, value, or if a large percentage of the population would actually enjoy the tuning. At this price point, I personally feel like those sort of things just don't matter as much. Top priority sets are exactly that. These are sets that I would immediately go out and buy to have in my rotation as soon as I could afford them, especially in custom form because they're just that unique or that special or they just gelled with me that well. Next is the I want these tier. These are IEMs that I really, really liked, but I wouldn't run out and get them as quickly as the sets in the sort of top tier of this list. Finally, at the bottom is the I'm bored tier, which is IEMs that I would really only buy if I was in the dystopian position of having owned everything else and getting really bored with the hobby. These are sets that I personally would not buy if I had the money. The Psyche here is an interesting case. It's Moondrop's flagship, and as I said in my Cantor review, my expectations of a flagship IEM is that it sort of serves as a thesis statement for the brand's house sound and their brand identity. That's half true. Moondrop has a lot of female vocal-focused IEMs, but as I pointed out earlier, they're actually all tuned quite differently from the Psyche. The vast majority of them are just warmer than this. Most similar one is the now discontinued Stellaris, so this doesn't really feel like a thesis statement for the Moondrop house sound. What it does feel, though, is like a thesis statement for the brand's identity. This IEM feels to me like a love letter to the whole anime/manga/waifu community. The faceplate design is a dead giveaway. This set feels almost tailor-made for VTuber, anime, J-pop, Vocaloid type music, and that sort of female vocal-focused genre that it is. I feel like it can work for all genres, and if you want to tweak the sound, they did give you the Echo B dongle in the box. You can make it sound like the Dusk, or you can make it sound like the Blessing 3, or the Variations, or the Stellaris, or you can try your own custom tunings if you want. But in its stock sound, I think it can work for other genres. It just isn't as much of an all-rounder as other sets that I've tried at this price point. However, at this price point, I personally feel like specialist sets make a lot of sense. Some people with the money are just going to go buy what suits their library the best, and if your library is absolutely packed of female vocals, this is an easy sell. For me, with my eclectic library full of ridiculous genres, as much as I love the faceplates and what this does with anime music, I'm going to have to put these in the I want these tier. I genuinely like them a lot, but due to how ridiculously large and crazy varied my library is, they're not going to be at the very top of things that I would buy if I hit the lottery. However, that doesn't mean I think that no one should buy these, and as with my last high roller video, I'm not going to bother going over the downsides of these IEMs. I'm just going to tell you what buyer these are for. These are for essentially two groups of people. First of all, these are for the Moondrop completionists. Do you own The Beautiful World? Do you own all their other special edition limited IEMs? Are you a massive fan who has all the cash? You probably already own these. Second group, though, if you have the money, you want an IEM that seems almost tailor-made, completely focused on providing the absolute best anime music experience you can possibly get. The Psyche is very difficult to top in that sort of standard. Of the 4 kilobuck sets that I've had in-house to listen to, the Psyche is with no question the best IEM for female vocals and anime music in general of all of them. It just does something really special with that genre, hence why I spent this entire review talking about anime songs. That tuning is not going to be for everybody, but the Psyche could really represent a serious endgame for a big anime fan with deep pockets and a library full of female vocals, anime OSTs, Vocaloids, VTubers, the lot. And that's it. The second episode of the High Roller Hunt is in the books. As I mentioned earlier, I've got 2 more coming after this. Letshuoer Cadenza 12 is going to be the next one on the chopping block, so look forward to that one. But for now, I want to say a massive thank you to Compadres Club member Z for loaning me these for review. I really enjoyed having them in-house to listen to and watch anime with. I also want to send out a huge thank you to the rest of the Compadres Club members. $5 a month, you get a say in the direction of this channel by choosing what I review with my membership money. Helps the channel become more independent over time. That's enough out of me today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.